7:15, is it? 7:15 in the morning. I'm just checking the feed to see who's here, just to make sure this whole thing is working. I went live the other day, and as I went live, it went to a completely blank screen. So we'll see if it's working. Here we go. I am live across social media. I thought about coming up with a cheesy name for going live at 7 in the morning. I thought, Seddon at 7. But I was like, oh my God, I couldn't even say that. It's so cheesy. So what I wanted to talk about this morning, and I'm going to try and do a few more of these live, is there's a lot of people in business who are not necessarily what you'd class as extroverts. So they are introverts, yeah, and there's nothing wrong with introverts and extroverts, very different types of people. But what I've found is it can be very draining if you are an introvert. I would classify myself as somebody who is probably an introvert who forces themselves to be in the front end of business. So about 5 years ago, I was less visible, and for most of my career, which I don't know how many years I'm in now, 25 years or whatever it is, 24 years of my business career, I was behind the scenes and didn't like going in front of camera, still don't like going in front of camera, but I'll come to that in a moment. And there is a practical application for people here. Don't like going in front of camera, don't like the sound of my own voice. See how, when I look at videos that I've done, I go, oh my God, what have I done? But that's how I come across. That's what I'm like. And for most of my career in business, I was behind the scenes. So when I was working in television, I was behind the scenes. When I was working on some major projects, marketing projects for, particularly an event at Wembley, I was behind the scenes. So most of my career, I've enjoyed being behind the scenes. But 5 years ago, it was kind of forced upon me that I had to come in front of the camera. I didn't like it, didn't want to do it. Much rather sometimes be sat behind a computer. I get exhausted after spending lots of time on calls, talking to people. So I am probably your classic introvert, but I've kind of forced myself and committed to myself that I can't do what I do naturally, or want to do naturally, which is, just work on a computer. And lots of business owners feel this way, and lots of business owners don't want to put themselves out there. And there's two elements of putting yourself out there. There's the putting yourself out there and not wanting to be criticized, which is perfectly, a legitimate feeling. But then there's this introvert uncomfortableness of not wanting to put yourself out there. And those two things can be a toxic combination, because we live in an age where media, everybody, every business and every person is almost like a celebrity. I don't mean that literally, but everybody's has to showcase their personal brand. They say who they are, what they're about. People want to know about them. Social media, personal profiles do way better than corporate profiles. So you have this scenario now whereby if you're a bit more introverted and maybe you're a little bit afraid of putting yourself out there in case somebody critiques you or rips you to shreds or trolls you or whatever, you got that little fear running alongside the fear of, I don't feel comfortable doing this stuff. I'd rather just do my work and do a good job and get paid for it. And the problem is that our world is going the other way. Our world is going the other way, whereby if you're not visible, you are invisible. I talk about the 5 levels of authority. And I always say there's 6. There's 6 levels of authority, and I use an example of steps. And at the top of the steps is the influencer. By that, I mean a real influencer. I don't mean the ones where it's like, oh, I'm just declaring I'm an influencer. The real influencers at the top. And on the bottom level, you've got what I call the commodity trader, the broker, the person who's looking for a deal. And they have very little authority. It's just about looking for a deal. And then, but you have one lower. You have the person who has 0 levels of authority, 0 levels of influence, 0 levels of impact. And they're the people who are invisible on social media. Now, I'm not saying everybody has to become an influencer. I actually think it's impossible. I don't think it works. You know, I use the example of, imagine if EasyJet, just think about this. Imagine if EasyJet let everybody buy speedy boarding. So, you know, you go to book your plane ticket and there's 300 seats on the plane, and the EasyJet decide, do you know what? We're going to let everybody, all 300 people, buy speedy boarding. If they do that, guess what? Speedy boarding means nothing. But we are getting to a place where 0 on the social authority scale is dangerous. Yeah. In other words, if you're not showing up, if you're not in the network, it's almost like you don't exist. Now, if you're an employee, you know, that's easy to do. But if you are a solopreneur or a small business owner, you can't afford to do that because you are the front person. And I'm sure some, you know, there'll be hopefully some HR people watching this. It's weird, and maybe we don't want to say this. It's weird, right? And maybe I shouldn't say this, but I know a lot of people who would see that somebody not having a presence on social media is a red flag. Not being there is a red flag, which is weird, isn't it? Maybe maybe I'm talking nonsense here. But if you are trying to grow your business, if you're trying to get customers, the best place to do it is actually from your personal profile, particularly if you're a small business. You know, if you're Starbucks or you're Google, you can be faceless because the brand is so well known. But if you're a small business, you as the leader, whether you're an introvert or not, whether you feel like an idiot doing this, talking to a camera, whether you feel like putting your picture out there, telling personal stuff out there, whether you think that's silly or not, you kind of have to do it. It's like expected. You know, before the pandemic, I don't know whether I'm allowed to say that because I'm on social media, but before the whole thing, it was something like 34% of decision makers would vet somebody before they booked a call by going to LinkedIn or social media to see who the hell's this person. It's kind of massively rocketed up that people use social media as a vetting mechanism to check people out. So think about it. Your fear of offending, upsetting, looking foolish on social media, and your generally fear of, being an introvert and not being comfortable with doing this kind of stuff or not wanting to do this stuff, it kind of makes a very difficult position for you. And I faced this about 4.5, 5 years ago, where basically I had to, rather than hide behind the scenes, I had to come out to the front. And I didn't like it, still don't to some degree, but it's like a necessary evil that I have to do this. And I go through this weird routine before I go on camera. And anybody in the Maverick team at some point will tell you this. If you know me well enough, they'll tell you. I go through this whole weird routine before I go on camera, which is comical to watch, but it's me trying to psych myself up to go on video. But I'm not trying to kind of tell you my violin story. What I'm trying to say is, actually, if you're a small business owner and you're afraid of putting yourself out there, you have to find a mechanism to get over it. Not everything I say, not everything I do will be perfect on social media. Not everything you say, not everything you do will be perfect on social media, but we have to do it because we're trying to establish a brand, we're trying to build a message, we're trying to get our names out there, we're trying to make sure people see us so we can demonstrate some trust and credibility, and we have to do it. And a lot of times, you know, coming to that trust and credibility, people are so afraid that when they do something, it might undermine their trust and credibility. They don't do things. And just the sheer effort of putting yourself out there, you know, the reality is, right? The reality is, some people, right? And I had something yesterday, right? I'll tell you about that in a minute. Some people will not like what you do. That does not mean you don't do it. Yeah, it doesn't. Some people probably can't stand me. Probably some people have some colorful metaphors for me. And some people will have some colorful metaphors for you. But it doesn't mean you kind of hide away from it. It doesn't mean you kind of provoke them. It means you just get on with your thing. You just get on with it. But sometimes what happens is we're so afraid of getting it wrong that we don't do something. And even if we got it half right, it would be better than not doing it at all. We're so afraid of putting ourselves out there. We're so afraid of saying the wrong thing, upsetting somebody, offending somebody, or making a mess of it, a pig's ear of it, or feeling silly or feeling stupid. I won't watch this video back, but I will put it out there because I have to show up. I have to get my name recognized because we live in a world where that is essential. Yeah, if you are not a global brand with $1 billion or multi-million dollar marketing budget, you have to leverage your own brand, who you are as an individual, to get attention of your target audience and draw them in. And if you're afraid to do that, you've got to kind of conquer that demon, because what you'll find is the sales you get will actually be the crumbs from somebody else's table. The deals and opportunities you get will be the crumbs from somebody else's deals. Look at your company pages. If you've not got big ad budgets, you have to use a profile on LinkedIn. If you're on Facebook, most of the people who are selling well on Facebook are not selling through pages. It's different if you're e-commerce because you can be faceless, but you're a graphic designer. It's all about your identity. If you're a marketing manager or freelancer, it's all about your identity. Always about your identity. So my camera's just died. Sod's law. I just wanted you to think about that. If you're an introvert and you're on social, you probably need to overcome this. You probably need to conquer this fear.